Despite having been open for quite a while, I haven't really talked about Volcano Bay, Universal's ambitious water park that opened in 2017. Previously, Universal Orlando owned and operated the historic Wet n Wild, which it had purchased in 1998. Located right across the highway, it was certainly very popular, although outdated, and when Universal began to really change its creative direction in the 2010s, it was decided to close the park and open a brand new one with a strong cohesive theme right next to their already existing parks. Wet n Wild operated through the end of 2016, with demolition quickly occurring and resulting in the quick building of the Endless Summer Resort, with its first phase and tower opening in the summer of 2019. However, Volcano Bay replaced Wet n Wild as Universal's water park, opening on May 25th of 2017. And while I wish I could go back in time to experience Wet n Wild, as it was a park that I just never happened to attend, Volcano Bay is obviously stunning and a much stronger park. The way the volcano rises above the highway develops a lot of exciting intrigue, and unlike Wet n Wild, the park has a lot of strong theming and an entire backstory to tie it all together. It stands as a very different contrast to Disney's water parks though, as its storytelling is approached in a completely different way, and its attractions are a lot more thrilling, fueling debate over which company has the better water parks, even though they're distinctly very different. You might recall in my recent video on Epic Universe that I made the point that its hubland, Celestial Park, is filled with eclectic artifacts from different worlds and universes. The trains of Stardust Racers have flux capacitors on the back. The Christmas store includes Earl the Squirrel, a popular character from Universal Studios Florida's Christmas event, and among all of the merchandise and references to the other lands featured in the park, there was also a Volcano Bay reference that I knew existed, but I wasn't sure where. I did manage to get back to the park recently, and discovered that at CelesTiki, the bar located close to the portal for Dark Universe, that this is where the influence from Volcano Bay exists. The bar is unfortunately not very aesthetically exciting, but on the menu, there are two specific drinks, the Waturi Punch and the Kanuku Daiquiri. These directly reference the lore of Volcano Bay, and it immediately made me realize that for as much as I liked the park, I knew almost nothing about its lore or the story behind it, and so I thought it would make for an interesting video. When you enter Volcano Bay, you're given a TapuTapu, a waterproof wristband that allows you to enter a virtual queue for the slides, and most relevant to the video, allows you to trigger interactive elements throughout the park, many of which contribute directly to the story and lore. With the recent announcement that Volcano Bay would be discontinuing usage of the TapuTapu starting October 1st of 2025, I was immediately concerned that a lot of themed elements in the park would be going away forever, and so it made this video all the more urgent because Universal might actually be shutting off theming elements that tell the story. However, when I got to the park and went to explore its different interactive elements, I discovered that nothing worked. I'm not being hyperbolic. Literally not a single interactive effect was operational, and at a time when Universal has been noticeably improving maintenance across its other parks, I found Volcano Bay to be the complete opposite. Along with the announcement that TapuTapu was being discontinued, Universal also made the statement that the park would be closing for a 5-month-long refurbishment, from October 26th of 2026 and through March 24th of 2027. That's a pretty substantial period of time, and having been operating for 9 years without a refurbishment by that point, other than a 4-month-long closure during COVID, where I don't believe any substantial changes were made, Volcano Bay is long past due for a major refresh, especially considering that the park is in a bit of a rough state. This lengthy closure also raises a lot of questions too. Will Universal restore its theming elements or even add more without the need for TapuTapu? And in a park that desperately needs more capacity, will it actually expand and add new slides or attractions during this closure? If Universal is trying to aggressively expand into a multi-day resort to compete with Disney with the opening of Epic, then it's time that Volcano Bay saw some substantial improvement too. However, I think it's telling that the park needs to close for a lengthy period of time. So today, let's dive right into Volcano Bay and try to piece together the story from whatever still remains. Hey, just a quick favor before we begin, but videos like these take a decent amount of time to research and money to produce. So if you'd like to show your support for the video and the channel, you can really help me out by just leaving a like. The initial journey to Volcano Bay is a weird one, because to get there, you park in the Universal parking garage in a special designated area and take a short bus ride to the park itself. I understand that Universal was very limited on space, so this unconventional setup makes sense, but it does also lead to a very fun reveal. After exiting your bus and moving through a themed tunnel, you find yourself in a lush landscape. You can either take an escalator up, or walk the winding path through the dense jungle, which despite being meant for ADA accessibility, I actually prefer this route because it's a bit more immersive and makes you feel like you're actually getting lost in the jungle. Walking up the path, it opens to a reveal of the Volcano Bay entrance house, which is where you purchase tickets if you haven't already done so. You might also notice one of the towers of Cabana Bay, one of Universal's hotels that has its own dedicated entrance to the water park, and I like the small fountain features under the lettering of the sign, which is a fun flourish that adds a lot to this entrance. Moving under the structure, you encounter a Moai statue, who doesn't move, but occasionally makes some silly commentary or asks a humorous question.
So, where are you from? Come here often?
On moving through a mission and walking up the path, the park is designed in such a way as to reveal the impressive volcano. And while yes, Disney pioneered this kind of reveal back in 1989 with Typhoon Lagoon, it's still very cool all the same. That said, why is the park anchored around a volcano, and how does all the theming tie together to create a story? I discovered that it was actually difficult to know where to begin, because the story of the park is not well documented, so I had to piece together the lore from a few different sources. First, the Discover Universal blog posted a broad outline of the story of the park a few months before it opened, and surprisingly, the Universal Orlando app provides a bit of story exposition for the attractions and dining locations if you click on them. However, none of this really explains much of what you see in the park and the backstory behind it, and so I learned a lot more from a video posted by VincentVision, where he highlighted specific elements of the park and matched them to the backstory. I'll link his video in the description because it's really entertaining and well produced, but I also want to give him credit because his video gave me a really good starting point to better understand the story that I'm about to explain. Volcano Bay is obviously inspired by a variety of Pacific Island cultures, and like many of them, has its own creation myth. Here, the fiery god Krakatau tries to control his daughter, Tai Nui, who falls in love with a boy named Kala. I believe that this legend is represented on a small path that moves under the volcano with this particular kinetic piece. Discovering their love and flying into a rage, Krakatau banishes Kala into the sky, where he becomes the moon. Tai Nui is understandably devastated, and in her sadness, her tears become the sea. On a walking path, there is a structure with a bell which is difficult to decipher, but I believe may tell this story, as underneath it, there is an art piece that I believe represents her tears being collected to form the world in which the story of Volcano Bay exists. In realizing the gravity of his mistake and causing grief to his daughter, Krakatau pulls the earth to the sky in an attempt to reunite the lovers, creating the volcano. Ashamed of his anger and jealousy, he then imprisons his rage inside the structure, creating the fire spirit known as Vol, hence the name Volcano, and creating the realm of Volcano Bay, where earth, water, and sky are all united. The legend continues though, and much later speaks of a civilization known as the Waturi people, which appropriately is a pun on the adjective watery. You know, like watery people, get it? I hope you do. The Waturi had been canoeing across the ocean in search of a new home throughout the South Pacific, and in doing so, encountered a number of cultures that influenced their own. As they traversed the ocean, they sought out their guide, a fish named Kanuku, but it wasn't until they reached the edge of the world that they found him, jumping and playing in the waves. Soon, Kanuku and the Winds of Fortune led the Waturi people to their destined home, the paradise of Volcano Bay, where they built their new civilization and took inspiration from the people that they encountered in their journey. You can clearly see this reflected throughout the park, where the moai are clearly taken from the Rapa Nui, which contrasts with Japanese architecture found in the seating area of the Kohala Reef Restaurant and Social Club. If you look at some of the bars around the park, for example, Dancing Dragons and the Kanuku Boat Bar, they are being run out of defunct Chinese junk ships. Otherwise though, the architecture throughout the different areas of Volcano Bay can come off as generic Polynesian, but there is distinct architectural and decorative flair that alludes to the backstory of the Waturi people's travels before settling here. Volcano Bay, while an excellent park, does take a very different approach to theming than what you will see at the Disney water parks. You may or may not have seen my video from a few years ago where I took a look at them, and concluded that while they've been mostly untouched and are essentially stuck in the 90s, that's actually their greatest strength. I really like both Typhoon Lagoon and Blizzard Beach quite a lot, even if they're not on the scale of Volcano Bay. And despite Blizzard Beach being a more thrill-focused park with some of its steep body slides, it's still much calmer when compared to the even more thrilling attractions of Volcano Bay. That being said, the most fundamental difference between them is that the Disney water parks were designed to have their attractions exist diegetically within the story of their parks. I've discussed this concept elsewhere in my videos before, but essentially in this case, it means that the slides of the Disney parks are meant to literally exist within the world of the story. For example, when you're queuing for the larger slides in Typhoon Lagoon, the actual queues were designed to wind up the mountain as if you're making an adventurous trek, and reaching the top, the actual slides exist as canals in the rockwork, allowing you to slide down and make your way back to the lagoon. In Blizzard Beach, the story is that the park is a former ski resort that was built up after a freak snowstorm in the middle of Florida, and most of the attractions relate back to that story, whether it be a raft attraction where you slide down a melting snowmobile race course, or take the plummet down from a ski slope from the tallest point on the mountain. In contrast, Volcano Bay's storytelling does put you into the literal island of the Waturi people in this sort of mythical realm, but the attractions themselves are very different, not attempting to disguise themselves as slides, but rather convey storytelling ideas through the abstract. For example, Hano Ika Moana refers to this pair of raft slides, with the green one, Ika Moana, conveying the idea that you're riding the waves like the Waturi did and encountering the legendary whale, Ika Moana himself. The blue slide, Hanu, conveys that just like the Waturi used to ride sea turtles, you'll do so too as you sweep up against the walls of the bowl feature in the ride. The water coaster, Krakatau, describes your raft as a canoe, and has you traveling through the mysterious depths of the volcano on this thrilling journey, almost like a rite of passage that many of the Waturi have taken themselves. The two slides of Makupuihi are described as allowing riders to brave the volcanic gorge, and Taniwa tubes are recreations of the trunk and root structures of puka trees, which the Waturi created for their recreational enjoyment. In the story of the park, Punga Racers is where Waturi children race each other through underwater sea caves, with the course named after the well-loved hero, Punga, the son of Tangaroa, god of the sea, and his mother, Mohoika, goddess of fire. At the top of the volcano, the Kala and Tainui serpentine body slides allow riders to essentially twist among each other through the depths of the volcano, abstractly representing the love story that created the island. At the very top of the volcano is the most daring of the attractions, the 125-foot tall trapdoor slide known as the Kookiri Body Plunge, where riders engage with the Waturi tradition of facing their fear in honoring the rageful goddess Vol. Other attractions are less related to the story, with the Oh No and Oh Yeah drop slides being described as embracing the Waturi spirit for fun. Volcano Bay is also divided into 3 areas, which are all centered around water features. As you walk in, this first immediate area is known as the Wave Village, and is anchored by Waturi Beach, the largest seating area of the park, where you enter the wave pool. Heading counterclockwise, as the park naturally guides you in this direction, you enter the River Village, which wraps around the Kopiko Way winding river, or essentially this park's lazy river, and contains Runamaka Reef, a play structure meant for young kids. The next area of the park is known as the Rainforest Village, which wraps around Tewa the Fearless River, which is a torrent river attraction that uses waves to push riders and adds a fun thrill element that still seems pretty novel in the industry. The last area of the park is known as just the Volcano, which is pretty self-explanatory, and of course features the most thrilling attractions. Going back to the theming aspect of the attractions though, I couldn't find any backstory for the names of the Kopiko Way Winding River or Tewa the Fearless River. After searching for it, I'm positive that no backstory actually exists, and that these names were probably chosen because they sounded in theme with everything else. In the case of certain attractions or slides, they convey abstract ideas such as riding through dried up lava channels, but otherwise, you're embracing the recreation of the Waturi. You spend all day having fun around the island, along with relaxing and dining. The theming of Volcano Bay is spectacular and well realized, but it's not particularly deep, which is why personally, I actually prefer the Disney water parks because I appreciate how storytelling touches every single corner there. That's not to say that I dislike what Volcano Bay is doing, but it's clearly built with a very different kind of design philosophy in its attractions, and doesn't really bother to hide its slide structures, instead putting them out in the open and trying to entice riders through their colorful flamboyance. An element of Epic Universe that I really enjoy is just how much detail there is to discover, and Universal has even taken this a step further through interactive elements. The Power-Up Band gamifies Super Nintendo World through its interactive features, and the magic you perform with wands throughout the Wizarding World has continued to become more and more advanced, creating a level of interaction that continues to evolve. When Volcano Bay opened, I liked that interactive elements were built into the park, and the TapuTapu, which was included with admission, reminded me quite a lot of Disney's Magic Band system. It let you link your credit card for easy payment around the park, was used to access lockers, let you link photos taken throughout the day, and allowed you to enter virtual queues for the slides and the water coaster, which helped manage the limited capacity of the park. Instead of waiting in an hour-long line with your feet burning on the pavement, you were given a return time and could spend your day enjoying a drink or relaxing in the wave pool or the rivers. As an added bonus, there were interactive touchpoints located throughout the park, such as this one on the bridge, allowing you to activate a water jet spit from the Moai that hits people tubing in the Kopiko Way River. However, while the storytelling of Volcano Bay can sometimes be a bit abstract, these interactive touchpoints would directly deliver the lore and backstory of this fantastic realm. The park really rewards you for exploring. If you find your way into the caves under the volcano, the interactive elements here are pretty interesting. For example, there's an area where you activate what I believe are fiber optic lights in the stone, which shows what I believe is the fish Kanuku. Another area under the slides, and right next to the Waturi art piece that depicts the love story of Kala and Tai Nui, there seems to be a song that I believe was sung from the faces carved into the stone. What does it actually entail? I have no idea, as it doesn't actually work, but considering its placement, I would assume that it probably retells the love story. When exploring Volcano Bay, I wondered what other interactive elements there were, but since none of them worked, I didn't know how many just simply sprayed people with water or otherwise contributed to the backstory of the park. There's also fewer than I thought there would be, but there's also almost no documentation on where they exist, so it's possible that I may have missed some as well. Something else that I thought was initially triggered by a touchpoint is in the core of the volcano itself. As fountains and red lights simulate geysers of lava, you encounter Vol, the goddess created and cast into the volcano from Krakatau's rage. Initially, I thought that this was just an event that you could trigger, but since it wasn't active when I was in the park, I've actually since discovered that it's interactive on a more personal level, where a hidden person plays the goddess and speaks to you in real time. That's pretty neat, or it would be if it was working when I was there. While not interactive, I did discover some interesting kinetic features throughout the park's shops as well, which work to further enhance the environment. For example, over in Krakatoa Katie's, it's full of interesting decoration, but there's a perch hanging from the ceiling with moving tropical birds. To the left of Waturi Beach is Waturi Marketplace, which contains 2 shops. Bikini Tiki mostly focuses on women's clothing and swimsuits, but while there aren't any moving elements in here, I am a fan of the decoration, with Polynesian kites hanging down from the ceiling. Moving across to TapuTapu Traders, this focuses on men's clothing and swimwear, and while decorated with interesting elements, I want to highlight the kinetic dragon piece, which I think alludes to the Dragon Bar. Having covered the theming of the park pretty thoroughly now, I also want to go back to the drink menu at CelesTiki, with the Waturi Punch obviously referencing the Waturi people, and the Kanuku Daiquiri referencing the mythical fish that led them to Volcano Bay. The lore and story of Volcano Bay isn't deep, but it is there, and with the closure next year, I'm really curious if Universal will fix or even enhance features throughout the park, which is what I want to get into next. The decision to remove TapuTapu is really perplexing to me, because on one hand, while I understand that they're probably expensive and there's issues that come with that, I otherwise see a lot of benefit for the park. The cleaning costs for these devices are probably not insignificant, and I'm sure that many get lost or stolen, but admittedly, their convenience contributes a lot to the park experience. I've been in Volcano Bay when it's quite busy, and it's very nice to be able to get a return time for the attractions or go do something for the next few hours without waiting in line. Usually, I'm against virtual queues becoming a feature of park management, but since this is a water park and the slides are generally interchangeable, I do think it works well here, so its removal is a negative for me. It's also convenient for accessing lockers, which I assume Universal will swap out for Face ID like they have in Epic, and while I haven't used it myself, I can see how linking a card to the TapuTapu to pay for food and drink is an excellent idea, instead of going back and forth to the lockers for your wallet or card. While the park also has less interactive features than I expected, and none that worked, I still think it's a great idea to incorporate into the park, and adds a lot of little fun moments that visitors will remember, allowing Universal to stand out among its competition. They've done so much with Super Nintendo World and the wand effects in the Wizarding World that they continue to upgrade and enhance, and with maintenance standards noticeably rising among the other parks, it's bizarre that Volcano Bay is being allowed to let it all fail. If the lengthy closure fixes the interactive features and instead provides buttons that allow you to trigger them, I would be very happy to see them return. But I also hope that since interactivity has become a key focus of the company, especially in Epic Universe, that Volcano Bay not only gets these fixed, but also adds additional elements that really enhance the explorability of the park. While Universal often tries to sell Volcano Bay as their third theme park, which is just not true because it's so categorically different, it does feel like it has been shoved to the side and isn't receiving the investment that it really could use. Volcano Bay is a park that I've heard often reaches its capacity limits in the summer, which certainly indicates it's popular, but it also hasn't received any major expansions or new slides since it opened. The park itself is very constrained by its location, so I understand that expansion is difficult, but if you look at satellite photos, there is actually what I believe is a small expansion pad, which could actually go a long way, considering that water parks generally don't use up too much space. With the opening of Epic Universe, I'm sure that Universal will turn back to the studios and islands for new rides and expansions to fight for tourist dollars, and really sell itself as a multi-day resort. But I think that part of that strategy needs to include an expansion for Volcano Bay, which doesn't just make the park more attractive, but might potentially raise its capacity to sell more tickets. Water parks aren't huge business in the United States, as the most popular, Typhoon Lagoon, only sees a little less than 2 million guests per year, which compared to the 20 million that Magic Kingdom could potentially see, looks like almost nothing. Still, the presence of Volcano Bay helps to show people that Universal is a multi-day resort with a lot to do, and by adding more capacity, especially since I'm confident that Epic will very much drive attendance to be consistently higher, it only helps to absorb the crowds and spread people out further. That said, is an expansion for the park even plausible during a 5-month closure? There's certainly a lot less work that goes into erecting slides that don't take up massive buildings, but I assume that Universal would at least want to put in theming elements and potentially rockwork for something new. Plus, it's not really necessary to close the park for a full expansion, but if it's going to close for a lengthy refurbishment, this would certainly be a great opportunity to put in new attractions that I think the park would greatly benefit from. I'm sure there's a lot going on behind the scenes that makes this lengthy closure necessary, but I also hope that, even at the minimum, the park reopens with additional features and theming to keep the experience fresh, which I think would go a long way. When given a choice between this and the Disney water parks, I would probably choose the Disney ones, but Volcano Bay is still excellent in its own way, and I thought that by trying to explore the lore and story behind it, that there was probably an interesting video to discover. My appreciation for the park is certainly better now that I took the time to go there and learn about it, but I'm also disappointed that none of the interactive features worked, which I think are a core distinguishing element that really helps the park stand out. Will the average person pick up on the full narrative? Probably not, but as we've seen with most of Universal's new attractions, throughout all of Epic Universe, and through the nuanced storytelling of Halloween Horror Nights, the company is building with theme park fans in mind, and you can really feel the difference in the product, which is only attracting more eyes to their parks and resorts. Volcano Bay is a great park even if you don't know its story, but by discovering the hidden elements and interactive effects, it creates a sense of wonder for park visitors who will recognize that the company went above and beyond, solidifying the quality of the product and the reputation, and, in my opinion, leading to positive word of mouth and repeat visitation. I've always liked Volcano Bay, but my appreciation is even stronger by having researched this video. So hopefully, if you feel the same and made it here all the way to the end, you can help me out by just simply leaving a like if you haven't already done so. As always, if you enjoy videos like these, you can also hit the subscribe button with bell notification so as to be alerted to new videos as they're released.